We're live on Hosted
Woo!
Bar, the Hosted Bar. I don't know if we're
Even
the
better.
Hosted Bar or if we're just Hosted Bar. The title screen there, the title thing just says Hosted Bar. But I don't know if we're supposed to be the Hosted Bar or just Hosted Bar. Does it really matter? Am I making too big of a
Say,
deal
I'm
of
not
this?
Ohio State University, so I'm not going to
I feel
get
like I'm
caught up
making too
on
big of a
a
deal of
the.
this.
A
All
little bit.
right. What are you drinking?
I am taking a page from last guest's book, and I'm doing a seedlip mocktail. So it's seedlip and some LaCroix flavored water, and then a bit of mint. And it's the seedlip garden, so I will say it's a bit of a green tasting drink,
Yeah, you said it was
but
very herby.
it is. They call it garden and they mean it. But it's something fun, something different, something good for a
Well,
Friday
it is
afternoon.
summer, so uh, a good load of botanicals seems summery.
I could see though why most of my people I know who have had this seed lip mixer say it's really good with booze. Like it's
It's good
supposed to be
with
a
booze. What?
alcohol replacement.
Doesn't that defeat the purpose of drinking the non-alcoholic liquor?
It does, but I could see how it would be
Because
a
you were
really
like,
good
"Oh, this
mixer.
is really herby," and I was gonna suggest like, "Well, why don't you mix it with like, you know, booze?" But I didn't mix. I didn't
Right?
suggest that because I figured it was silly to mix non-alcoholic spirits with
Right.
booze.
It's supposed to be that, and one thing that's nice about it is it really does have strong flavors, so it does carry on
Yeah.
its own.
Because if you're gonna
Um,
mix booze, I mean, put in a
but
nice dry vermouth or something.
right, like I can see how why a lot of people use this
Yeah,
as a
sure.
mixer, but it's, it's a fun little
What
mocktail for
I
now. How
have
about
the
you?
Fire Engine Red. Um, I have a Fire Engine Red Negroni. It is made with a currant sauce instead of Campari. So I picked black and champagne currants. I mashed them all up. I made a juice out of the currants and I then turned that into this lovely drink, largely based on a Negroni recipe, which is gin and sweet vermouth. And instead of Campari, I put in the currant juice. I
Are you gonna get like
I've
a
tried
Kool-Aid
this. I've
smile?
tried this drink before. In fact, you had this drink when I tried it before, and it was incredibly sweet because I put way too much. I put way too much gin and way too much juice. Gin and juice. Hey, there you go. Somebody should make a song called Gin and Juice.
It
I
might go
feel like
far.
there could be a good tune to be had with that. So, in sipping on my gin and juice, I managed to get the ratio a little better. I think I can tone down the currents even a little bit more than I did. But I did a
Mhm.
little over an ounce on the gin, a little under an ounce on the vermouth, and I did right around an ounce on the currant juice, which is roughly the mixture for a Campari, rather for a Negroni. But instead, I think I could have gone with maybe half an ounce of the currant juice. I think I can tone it down even that much.
Maybe I should steal some of your current juice for this, and that might
I was going to
liven it up
suggest
and
it, but I was a little
knock down
afraid that
the.
the current, like the last drink I made with this was like a little overboard. So I didn't want to recommend it and then be like, I don't know how much to put in though, because it will taste like Kool-Aid if you put in too much.
Right,
But I
right.
think I'm
Well,
starting to get it
next
figured
time
out.
we
I
have
think
a
for a
whole
low
bottle of
ball, the
seedlip.
answer is somewhere between half and three quarters of an ounce. But
Fair enough.
we'll see. Anyway, it's very good. We are not theoretically we are not talking about how to make Negronis or currant juice all with the entire episode.
No, no, no. But we're trying hard. No, instead we're talking about uh Carrie Bowling well, 2 weeks ago was talking about
Yeah,
side hustles. Um,
something we are both
and
very
just
familiar
to
with.
right, and so she is too. We're not paid to plug her book, but it is one that I'm currently reading, and it's right here, and it's all about being, doing side hustles. And her thing is, I think, is really interesting is that her her full-time gig is nothing but side hustles,
Right.
as opposed to us, which both have full-time gigs, and opposed to you, who keeps forgetting that a side hustle is on the side, and you just keep trying to add full-time
Yeah, I have
jobs.
that. I have that problem. Um, I think at one point I had like four basically full time jobs. I am down to one and a half. I think I've roughly gotten one of them down to below full time. I hope I
But you
hope
fought
nobody I
it.
work with is listening to this. But no, anyway, I mean, it's amazing how much time you can find in the day when you work evenings and weekends too. Um,
Right. Well, and I think that's one thing that we didn't really touch on a lot with Carrie, but we didn't explore with her, but she talked about it a couple of times, and they certainly talk about it in her book, is that a lot of times this side hustle is about being time
yeah,
wealthy, and how um, time is finite and money isn't really. So really be careful with that that exchange, right? Because sometimes I think with side hustles, they can suck up your
yeah, that's my
time
problem. I have a
and
time management problem. I
right.
admit that. My time management is not the greatest.
And so while a side hustle can be really rewarding and can grow into something big, I mean, if you listen to How I Built This, the podcast from NPR, I mean, almost every story is how this side hustle turned into this multi-million dollar business. Um, but again, almost all of them talk about that getting close to burnout or feeling really stretched thin, and how that how you have to be really careful with that.
Yeah, I agree. The risk of burnout, uh, not the risk of burnout, the risk of burnout is nothing. The actual reality of burnout kind of sucks, though. Having run into it a few
Right.
times over the course of my career, actual burnout is no fun at all. It seems like it comes with the territory, and I suspect that I'm sort of more of a glutton for punishment than I should be, because I tolerate it in ways that I don't think people should, and honestly I don't think I should, but it just sort of happens. And it's no fun at all. Like you just don't want to do anything. Like you're just sort of done with it all. And
But I
it's hard to get out of a burnout. Um, it's hard to get out of it, for sure.
so I think and that's the dark side of side hustles that we didn't really talk about a lot with her. Instead, we talked about kind of the brighter side of, if you think you want to be an entrepreneur, this is a good way to kind of dip your toe in, or it helps kind of lessen the risk because you're not putting all of your eggs in that new business basket.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's fair. Um, at some point, the hard thing about side hustles and the hard thing about starting businesses and sort of running them on the side, maybe, is that at some point I feel like you need to shit or get off the pot. And it can be hard to do that when you're running a hustle, right? When it's your side thing, at some point you either need to just resign yourself to the fact that this is a side hustle, that you're not going to devote time to it, and that you're going to have to be okay with the consequences of that, which may be that it doesn't grow as much as you want it to, that it's not as impactful as you want it to be. because you have to make sacrifices. Otherwise, you need to commit to it. I think.
Well, I think you have to make sacrifices, whether it's full or side, right? So if it's a side thing, like you said, the sacrifice is maybe it doesn't grow as fast as you want, or it could or should, or the other thing, or it takes up more time than maybe you would like. But the other thing is, if it's your full-time thing, you might be sacrificing health
Yeah.
insurance, uh, retirement funds, um, the security of a job. So I think both sides, neither is golden everything, and it's the risk you want to take, right? Which pain are you okay with? What are you comfortable being uncomfortable doing?
Yeah.
Um, and so one thing I liked was kind of the distinction between side gig and side hustle, right? A side gig is, oh, I'm doing this one time or I'm doing this
Sure.
short term. A side hustle is kind of how do I, how is this always kind of going? I see a lot of relationships between this and like the, the term a few years ago was passive
Sure.
income. It seems like a lot of the side hustles that she was talking about were, and even in the book, is a lot of that kind of passive income stuff where you're not putting your heart and soul into it. You're kind of relating, I'm not having the impact. Um, it's something that's making money so you can do the stuff that you want to have impact that's maybe not going to be something that pays your rent.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, I think the difference between passive income and a side hustle is who's doing the work, at least to my mind, right? When I think passive income, I think, oh, that's somebody else is doing the work, is doing sort of the day to day work of it, but I'm collecting the check, right? So there, I think of like rental units, right, where you hire a property manager. You literally own the property, and that's it. Like you pay out you collect the rent, you pay out the property manager, and whatever's left over is yours. And then you pay your mortgage out of that, and the remainder of that is profit, right? And there, you're not, you, the owner, the landowner, aren't really doing anything. You have no active role in sort of the management of the property. Um,
So I think that you're making a distinction that they aren't. Um,
Fair.
I think that so just so we all are
I mean,
kind
that's
of
how
using the
I
same
think of
definitions.
passive
I'm not sure.
income.
Well, I think that's how you think of passive income, but you're saying that you don't see that as being a side hustle, and I think that's not. And I don't want to put words in Carrie's mouth, but I think she'd say that is a side hustle.
Oh, that
They
definition
do,
of passive
do real
income
estate.
is a subset of side hustle. That side hustle is sort of a broader category that
Yes,
includes passive income. I'd buy that.
I think so.
I'd at least be willing to concede it. I sort of, at least in my mental space, think of them differently, but sure. I mean, it all works. Um, I do agree that, the side hustles work particularly well, I think, when it's something that you enjoy doing, right? And so, the way the old adage, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life kind of thing. Um, it's stupid, but I find it to be true. I mean, largely true, right? And so the kinds of things that, at least the kinds of things I've done on the side, and I suspect the kinds of things you've done on the side, are things that you enjoy doing. They're not. You're not doing it just because it makes money. In fact, you're usually doing it not because because it doesn't make enough money. You're doing it specifically because it doesn't make a lot of money. Until you can figure out how to make it make money, and maybe the answer is it never makes money. Um, that was sort of where, I mean, for those that know me, aren't coming at this as a complete stranger. Um, my time with Madison Craft Beer Week was exactly that dilemma, and 100% why we sold it, right? It was becoming something that was going to require more than my side time. It was going to require more time than I was able to commit as a side gig or as a side hustle, because it was definitely a side hustle, not a side gig under Carrie's thing. And we intentionally made the decision to sell it, and you can argue whether it was better for it or not, but it was certainly better for me to have sold it because I wasn't able to commit the time to it. And if I was going to commit the time to it, it was coming to the point where somebody was going to have to quit a job, and we didn't like
Right.
it that
Well,
much. We didn't we didn't enjoy it so much that we were going to quit our jobs over it.
so I think what you're seeing is something that's kind of went through a lot of her story and it not just the way she talked about it, but kind of her thing in the story of the book. Everything is a side hustle is something is a business that can be
Yeah.
sold, right? It's a mindset. Like this is not a hobby. This is not something. It maybe it's something that you just drop like it's hot when it doesn't work, or you can tell it to someone who says, like I've showed there's traction here. I show there's something here. If you devote more time or what you're doing, it can be purchased, right? Like for Madison Craft Beer Week, you guys could have just stopped doing it. You could have been like, meh, I'm done here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you didn't. You
Right.
sold
It
it,
well, it was built to be sold.
right? And
Yeah,
so,
no, that's right. I mean, that's fair. It was built to be sold
right,
from
but
the
that was from
beginning.
the
That was
beginning,
intentional. We knew we weren't
right?
going to run it forever.
Well, you knew you weren't gonna be, you knew you weren't gonna run it forever. And a lot of people know they're not gonna run it forever, but they don't build
Fair.
it to sell, right? Again, it's a mindset. It's a what are we doing here? One, and so a couple of mindsets go with it. One, what is this? This is not something that I'm building to be my
Yeah.
job right now. This is not this, but this is still a business, right? Like I think of a lot of people who like knit and crochet, right? And they just end up having so many scarves. They're like, maybe I'll just try selling them. But it's not really a
Yeah.
business, right? It's not really a hustle. It's a hobby that supplies their
Yeah.
yarn habit.
Yeah. The interesting thing to me, and why I find this all very interesting, is sort of what I see as the key to that whole thing. And one of the things that we focused on with Craft Beer Week, and so I'd be curious to get your reaction to this. But if you are going to build something for the sole purpose of running it on the side and then selling it, right? That's theoretically our purpose
Mm-hmm.
here, right? We're going to run something on our side as long as it's fun, and then when it stops being fun, we're going to sell it to somebody. Um, the whole thing,
I'm not sure I'd use
yeah,
fun
fair,
as
fair,
the thing,
fair.
but
We're going to
sure.
run something, and then at some point, we're going to sell it, right? That most of the time, what we're talking about selling is the brand and the goodwill that you've built up by running this thing in a way that somebody else hasn't run it before, right? Because you probably
Mm-hmm.
haven't invented something entirely new, right? I mean, with Craft Beer Week, for example, we didn't invent something entirely new. In the side hustle universe, I suspect that most people, and you can argue with this. I mean, I'm not telling you what you can and can't argue with. You can argue with whatever you'd like. But I suspect that for most people that are starting side hustles, that they're not really doing anything new. They're just bringing a different angle to it, right? They're bringing themselves to it to start, but that niche in the market is where they've gotten their wedge in. And when you're looking around to get rid of this thing, the reason why somebody is going to want to buy you is because of that wedge that you've inserted into the industry. right? And they
Hmm.
want to acquire that wedge because it's annoying them for some reason. It's eating into market share. It opens up a new market that if you had, this was sort of for us, right? That it opened up a market that the people that bought it were having a hard time breaking into, or was complementary to some other things that they were doing. And so, they didn't buy us because they didn't know how to run a craft beer week. If they'd wanted to start a competing craft beer week, they could. But they started the thing that we had, or they bought the thing we had because we ran it really well and it had a lot of goodwill and brand equity built up.
So I think I think kind of what you're saying is yes, I think what you're building as a side hustle is building goodwill, you're building brand, you're building proof of concept and a lower hurdle. So as you were kind of to go with the craft beer week one, you proved that Madison could have a craft beer week. You proved that there was buy-in. You proved that that there was something there. Um, right? So that helps them say, okay, and could they have started their own knowing that's true? Yeah, but they would have had to start from scratch with all of those relationships you had, explaining why theirs is different than yours, explaining why it this approach matters, coming up with in not only the things that worked for you, but also the failures. Like, oh my gosh, we tried, and this isn't necessarily true, but we tried having an app and it didn't work, or we
That was
tried
true.
having, um, right, and we tried having placemats and that was a failure, but it turns out the passports worked really well. And so you're not only learning the successes but you're learning the failures because you're helping them with that. Um, and I think what you're often when you're selling a side hustle or when someone's buying it, they're buying um the ability to scale, right? Because as a side hustle, you aren't going to you are rarely going to be able to invest in the stuff that can truly scale it. You just need to build something that they can see can be scaled. So go back to the hand knit
Mm-hmm.
hats, right? If your side hustle is hand knitting hats, that's really not going to scale. And someone isn't really going to be able to buy that because they're like, how am I going to find 7 people to knit these hats? You have to show how can this scale and start up that slope. You don't have to be far. You don't have to have shown, say this is my printing machine and this is my blah blah blah, but they have to be able to see where they can go with it. Whereas I think a full-time job, it's maybe some of the nascent startups, but they need it to be even kind of further along. If you're spending full time and you can't scale this, people are going to be like, oh, what are you doing? Like, then this problem is harder than it seems, or they want to have you lower that barrier even more. Whereas a side hustle, you can be like, no, I didn't install that machine in my basement. So I see that as a lot of the purchase out of side hustle, not just the goodwill, not just the mark, but the proof that this can go if you just make it more than what I can do on
Yeah,
nights
I
and
mean, you
weekends.
prove out, right, and this was actually, what we talked about with um, the person before Carrie, with customer validation and product validation with Cynthia. Yeah, sorry,
Cynthia.
excuse me, with Cynthia Delario, was customer validation and product validation, right? You're sort of doing that early customer, customer discovery
Research,
and
yeah.
validation. Um,
Hmm.
that might be a generous way to think about it, but I think in many cases it's probably true.
Right?
In a lot of ways, I might lump that in with goodwill, um, but for sure, just because in a lot of cases, like I said, at least it seems to me in a lot of cases that you're not really charting new territory, right? You're not really proving that the product
No, it's
works. But
being a
but
patent
yeah, I
attorney,
totally get it.
there are some things that are invented out of whole cloth and are truly big. I get that. But most businesses
Yeah.
aren't brand new. They're a tweak.
Right.
Uh, I always joke that I don't have any original ideas. I just steal them from our clients by them asking what to do. And people are like, "Oh my God, where'd you come up with this idea?" I'm like, I just listened, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so just listen and fill that void. Is that new? Maybe. Maybe you truly have something non-obvious, novel, blah, blah, blah. Most of the time you don't, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make money. Doesn't make it, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it can't make a whole boatload of money.
Well, people in the industry, right? People who are sitting there in the industry have sort of made their living doing what it is that they do. And then the new entrant comes in, right, and says, hey, all of you people who are consumers in this industry, you have problems. What are your problems? We'll solve those problems, right? And the current people who are in the industry are busy doing their own thing. They're not looking for new problems to solve. They're busy selling their current solution. And so the opportunity for the side hustle is to be able to come in and ask the people who ask consumers in the industry, you
Mhm.
know, how isn't this working for you? What can I do that would improve your experience in this industry? And maybe take more time at it than somebody who currently exists in the industry is
I
willing
think,
to take with it.
I,
Because you
I
don't
think,
have to risk failure, right? You already have a side job. You don't have to risk tanking a current product. You don't have to risk
right.
investment. You
If,
don't have to risk all of the time and effort it takes to build all that stuff. You are able to de-risk it by allowing some non-threatening person to explore that area on your behalf.
again, I think you're being a little biased in that that you're saying a side hustle has to be that and can't be more of that passive income or can't be more of that even the MLM stuff. I think all of those are side hustles. I don't think it has to be create a company from scratch. I think it can be if
Yeah, but you're
that's what
not
I
going to
think the
sell an
side hustle
MLM.
is.
You're not going to build an
No,
MLM to sell.
no, but that's not the only reason why you have a side hustle. That might be
No.
a reason. That's why you do one. I mean, I'm not sure you've ever you've like I said, you've had a lot of side hustles. I don't think you've ever had a side hustle that you're like, this is something that's just gonna be a thing I hold on to for a long time. Right? There's a book that I had that's passive income physician,
Yeah.
right? And he was he's a doctor and his side hustle is having that exactly what you're talking about with the project, the property managers and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, or people who flip homes
Right.
and things like that. That doesn't make it less of a side hustle.
Fair.
And so I think it's one of the things that she talks about a lot, Carrie talked a lot about, and the book talks about is that mindset. What is it? And being in knowing what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's excellent point, right? That you do have to. I mean, I guess maybe to bring this full circle because my clock tells me we're at 29 minutes and 30 seconds.
Indeed.
But to bring this full circle, my drink doesn't have Campari. No, anyway. um, it's shit or get off the pot, so to speak, right? You have to pick a direction, right? Is this something that you're building to sell, or is this something you're going to run forever, right? And recognizing that, and not thinking you have one when you have the other, right?
Right.
And being honest with yourself about what it is that you're trying to accomplish and building the thing according to its purpose, right? If I were building Craft Beer Week, for example, as something that I was going to run forever, I would have built it in a very different way,
Right.
right? But I built it to scale as fast as possible, to add as many people as possible, so that I could, within a relatively short period of time, say, hey, look at all these people who are really excited about the thing that I did. Who wants to buy it? Right? And so
And
we made a decision early on, and I think that's the important part. Regardless of whether you call it passive income or whether you call it a side hustle or how you sort of approach the problem, you need to decide and need to be clear in your own head what you're doing. Is this going to be your thing that you're just going to run the rest of your life, relatively speaking? Or is this something that you're building for the purpose of handing off to some other industry uh, partner?
And this is what I like about side hustles is it's a microcosm for if you want to actually jump and do full-time hustle, all of the same decisions are brought in, right? What is it that I'm doing? What is my goal? What is my strategy here? When do I pull the escape
For sure.
hatch? When is this not working? And all of those things are done in a slightly less scary way because you're not unless you sink obscene amounts of money in your side hustle, which probably shouldn't, you're not going to lose your
Right.
home over, right? And so that's what I like about it, is it's how do I use this to learn my lessons without big pain. And so I don't know, I'm looking forward to finishing the book. I've started but I haven't finished. So I'm glad Carrie was able to share a lot of her thoughts, a lot of her experience. I hope her Star Wars birthday party went well.
Yeah, still disappointed I
Um,
didn't get the invite to that.
you did. She just forgot to give you the address.
It's a distinction
But all
without a
right,
difference, maybe.
no, I'm pretty sure it's a big deal to not have the address. Um, anyway, so I
I
think
think
that's
that's
all.
all. Thanks.
I think next one we actually are talking about. Can you believe it's going to be August already?
Well,
Which
that's what
means
happens after
September's right around
July.
the corner. I know, but just like the summer is ending fast,
I,
man.
I have a
And so we're
countdown with
having
my students. I always know exactly how far away mid August is because I do a countdown with my students. We are currently at 3 weeks left in the semester.
oh gosh. So we're having Rebecca Brown from Creative Business
Nice.
Interiors
I can't
come
wait for that.
and talk
That'll be
about
fun.
like getting ready to be actually back in the
And
office
how to come
and
back
how to make
into the office and
offices.
what your office should look like and some cool new trends
Yeah,
in uh, office styling. This is very
yes. So
relevant.
as we
This is very relevant. I wonder what she can do with a what is it, like an 80 square foot space.
because we too are going back into having an office. So yeah, can't wait for next month.
Awesome.